Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Vancouver this week, and he has been promising a renter's bill of rights. What is it, and would it actually help renters right now? In about half an hour from now, does your child dream of becoming an astronaut, or are they obsessed with outer space? We'll get them to the phone because Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen will be our guest. He'll take your calls on his impending trip to the moon and life as an astronaut. That's after 12:30. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. And thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. And do call us right now on our top story. Would a renter's bill of rights help renters? And what's needed to create better relationships between landlords and tenants? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Email bctoday@cbc.ca, or you can text us 236-330-2623. Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said that his government is planning on a number of measures to help renters in this country. And he spoke to Stephen Quinn on the early edition this morning.
The announcement yesterday was focused on the fact that we know the system feels unfair, particularly for renters, particularly for the vast majority of young people who are renters. That's why more protections through a renter's bill of rights, more support for renting and tenancy advocacy organizations and justice programs, but also, yes, making sure that if you're paying your rent every single month, and it's an increasingly large part of your monthly budget, that you're actually getting credit for that. Because when you build up your credit score as a reliable payer of rent, that will actually help not just you access a mortgage eventually, but it may even bring the rate of that mortgage down because they see that you're reliable, that you've been able to pay your rent. It makes no sense that someone who pays $2,000 in mortgage every month gets credit for it, but someone who pays $2,000 in rent every month and is diligent about it and responsible doesn't get any kudos for it.
That's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on the early edition this morning. Now, CBC's Ali Pitargis spoke to people around Vancouver and asked them if these measures would help.
Right now, just the cost of living. You can't actually have a life and save enough money at the same time. It's rough.
Not having $1 million.
So the Prime Minister just announced a new initiative where they are going to have your rental payments account for your credit score. Do you think that will help?
Like I said, I still wouldn't have $1 million.
There's just no way that would happen for me. I don't have any help from parents in terms of financial support. It's not possible for them. There's no generational wealth on my part. I'm currently like a contract worker, so job precarity, and I don't think I get paid that much either for how much Vancouver is, which is extremely expensive.
Well, Trudeau is promising a renter's bill of rights, along with a protection fund for renters and a strategy that would allow renters' payments history to count towards their credit score. Now, this afternoon on the Coast, you'll hear from the CEO of Landlord BC to comment on these proposed measures. And David Hutniak has said to the CBC that they are largely supportive of what was announced, but need more details on the charter piece. Even on that front, I'm quoting here, even on that front, transparency is not something we shy away from. So stay tuned to On the Coast in Metro Vancouver for that interview this afternoon. Right now, we're asking you on the show, what do you think about a renter's bill of rights? What are the rights that need better protection if you're a tenant? And what's needed to create better relationships between landlords and tenants? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest is Rebecca Love, a volunteer with the Vancouver Tenants Union. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, there was a lot that was announced yesterday, right? This Renters' Bill of Rights. Part of it would be a national standard for lease agreements, promising kind of a fairer situation for renters, as well as funding for advocacy groups. What are your main takeaways with these announcements?
It's a lot of nice language that ultimately says nothing. Across Canada, I can see it having an impact because it could bring the standards for all provinces up a bit. BC has pretty high rent protections already. It's just a matter of enforcing them.
Okay, so what are those protections that you say are not being enforced well enough?
Like we deal with a lot of bogus evictions, things like that. There's just no accountability past a certain point. I mean, if you talk to any renter in Vancouver, I would say everyone is very much on edge because we know that we can lose our homes pretty much at any moment. And trying to get back into the market or stay in the city is getting more and more difficult.
I'm going to go back to you on that, on what's needed. There was a report from the UBC Housing Research Collaborative that found, BC leads Canada with the highest eviction rate for the country when it comes to no-fault evictions. So I'll ask you more about that. Rebecca Love is my guest, a volunteer with the Vancouver Tenants Union. And so we're asking you, this Renters' Bill of Rights that Justin Trudeau is promising to protect renters and launching a national standard for lease agreements, and talking as well about renovictions as part of those measures. What do you think of a Renters' Bill of Rights? What are the rights that you think need better protection? And what's needed to improve the relationship or ensure a good relationship between landlords and tenants? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And David is joining us from Lillooet. Hi, David. Hi, David. Are you there?
I'm there. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Yes. Thanks very much for calling in. You're a renter yourself?
No, I'm a homeowner now.
Okay.
But I spent the majority of my life as a renter in Vancouver. And shortly, let's say I'd lived in a home in Kitsilano for about 10 years. And the home was sold to foreign investors. And shortly after that, we were asked rent eviction. So we were asked to leave. So we fought that. And there were tools in place that allowed us to fight it fairly vigilantly. And so we managed to stay for another year. And we're paid out at the end of our term. So I didn't feel too sore about it, other than I had to leave the town that I was raised in.
You had to leave Vancouver and move to Lillooet.
Well, the problem was that we just had a child, and I saw the ladder, the Vancouver ladder, and I thought, I don't want to be renting for the. Yeah, I don't want to be renting for the rest of my life. I having been rent evicted that one time and then heard the story many, many times, I thought to myself, well, I've got to do something better for my family. And the idea of owning a house was near impossible. We were both working, but there was no way we were ever going to be able to afford the buy-in in Vancouver. So we went looking around the province and found various places that were reasonable. And this place seemed very good to us because of pricing, but also proximity to the rest of our family in Vancouver. But I mean, all that aside, when we moved here, we rented while we were looking for a place, and we were rent evicted from there as well, or at least it was going to be. We were going to be rent evicted, and then the deal fell through, so we ended up staying for a little while longer. But I just wanted to say, like, the difference between Vancouver and the rest of the province is it's negligible as far as what's actually happening. It's the same all around. There's a lot more people. There's a lot less space. There's a lot of money to be made off of flipping your houses. So there's a lot of distinction that needs to be made. But I think the one thing that's not changing or isn't changing is the reflection on the other person's point of view. And I notice that, especially in this day and age, there's a lot of positioning and compartmentalization. There's a lot of
you're talking about tenants and landlords.
Yes, and in general.
In general, I mean, sure, like a polarization.
It's the way of the land these days. So I think we all need to sit down and stop drawing lines and start drawing commonalities and start figuring out where we can meet. Because having been on both sides of it, I recognize there's problems on both sides. And I don't think just a Bill of Rights for renters is necessarily going to solve all the problems, because at the end of the day, it's up to a person whether they want to rent out their home or a portion of their home. And so the harder you make it, the less space there's going to be. So inevitably it will backfire, I feel, unless there's an amendment, some kind of an attachment so that bad tenants are easily removed.
You're speaking as a landlord now as well, your experience as a landlord.
Yes, exactly. And like I say, I've been on both sides of it. I recognize the pains of both sides of it. So to me, the alleviation of those pains would definitely be the motion moving forward, rather than hard line decisions. It seems like a lot of the time we make these hard line decisions, we don't get a chance to see the ramifications of them until we have the problems in hand.
Yeah, David, I mean, it's great to hear from you as someone who has been on both sides of that fence. How do you remove that fence? How do we, ensure that there are these cooperative, we hear them, we get calls from people who say, I have a great landlord, I have a great tenant, but how do you ensure that is the norm?
I was going to say, I don't think there is any true assurances as far as, because you're dealing with humans. So you're always going to have ups and downs anytime you're dealing with people, with the public. But there has to be a sit down before we have these knee-jerk blankets that decide on the futures of all these average, normal, hardworking people.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of time wasted in people's lives fighting these fights. I know that it took us an inordinate amount of time to fight our rent eviction in Vancouver. It was, tribunals and it was ridiculous what we had to go through.
Well, David,
just to live in our home. So.
Yeah, really good to hear from you. Thank you so much. Great to have that picture from Lillooet. Rick is up next in Squamish. Hi, Rick. What are your thoughts on a renter's Bill of Rights? What are the protections needed?
I don't think it helps the average person at all. Just like the other thing where they're saying in BC you can't rent out your, unless you live there, you can't rent it out as a holiday place.
Short-term rental, yeah.
It doesn't help either, because those people that have those places are going to want at least $3,000 to $4,000 a month. How does that help the average person? I'm making grossly under the poverty level right now. I'm probably about $15,000 to $16,000 a year, and what I'm saying the government has to do to help housing is start building housing that's nonprofit and affordable, goes by income. Because in my town right now, we're building more condos and more apartments than any other place in BC, probably Canada, and none of it's affordable. You have to have an average income of $5,000 a month. That's where we need help. And if the government's, and I've heard none of the parties say that's what they're willing to do. They'll say they have solutions, but there is only one solution, and it's obvious. Build affordable housing. We're not all going to be drug addicts and drunks and troublemakers. I don't drink. I don't smoke weed. I don't do anything. I just need a place to live. I'm going to be 65 years old, and I could be homeless.
Okay. And so,
the place I'm staying in is for sale right now, and I could be out in 2 months.
Okay, I'm just going to point out that I'm sure people who are listening who have issues with addiction and substance use wouldn't, might say, we need help as well.
Those people need housing too, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is a lot of people think that when it's affordable, that there'll only be people on welfare there. I think we should have a place where families are allowed, where 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms and bachelor pads, and they all go by income. So that the highest rent will probably be $1,000 a month. I'm just throwing numbers out there.
Yeah,
but that's affordable.
Rick, do you hear anything in the province has announced this BC Builds program where they are building units for rentals for what they call middle income and that kind of thing. Are you seeing any in these measures that kind of go to what you're saying?
Well,
because
that's my point there. When they say middle income, what do they mean? They mean somebody who's making $30,000 to $40,000. If I was making $30,000 or $40,000 a year, I'd have a place to rent.
You don't fall into that category. I'm going to look up what.
Obviously, most of us don't. Look at on the news right now. All the paper. I'm one of those older people now. I'm going to be 65 on a pension. I'll be making less than $16,000 a year, and I have zero place to go. We have one old age home here, which is 55 and older. It's full, 230 units full. I've got a 2 to 3 year waiting period. It's unacceptable.
Really?
Unacceptable. And I'm the kind of person, kind of Scottish background. I'm stubborn. I will not live in a tent, and I will not live in a shelter. So if I'm homeless, where does that put me?
Okay. That's the.
And I'm doing protesting. I'll be protesting next week in Squamish as soon as Easter's over. Okay. I'll be having my sign saying we need affordable housing. I've been saying it for over 2 years now, and that's how long I've waited. I sold my trailer, gave all my money away to my family. I helped my family out, and now I've got very little money, and I'm just waiting to get housing. And I've been waiting over 2 years, and I'm told everywhere I talk, there's nothing. There's nothing for you. There's nothing for you. There's nothing for you. Oh. So I'm tired of it, and I'm talking for all British Columbians making under $20,000 a year.
Yeah,
help us
on the brink. Thank you so much for calling. I'm sorry that's it's such a struggle, and it is so emblematic of what a lot of people are going through. Let's go back to our guest now with the Vancouver Tenants Union. What goes through your mind when you hear that? Rick saying, "I'm going to be homeless. I'm still waiting for this affordable housing unit."
Yes, we see that a lot, and so many people are just right on the brink, and the least little thing, we're never going to be able to get on top of homelessness until we stop making more people homeless.
We heard earlier, I want to go back to the renoviction story as well that we heard. What are the protections? What's there? Because the BC government has taken some steps, it says, to try and prevent renovictions, putting the onus on the landlord.
Yes.
What, if any, have been the improvements on that?
Well, it worked. Like the evictions for that have dropped quite a lot. And as a result, we're now seeing a huge surge in landlord use evictions, caretaker evictions, things like that. So basically, as soon as you close one loophole, everyone moves to the next one that they can exploit. So hopefully we can close that loophole as well, and then I'm sure we'll discover
what is the
something
loophole?
else pop
What is the
up.
next loophole? What is the next loophole you've seen?
Nothing yet. But every time I think I've seen everything, they come up with something new. So we'll see.
And so what do you think is needed then to ensure that, people like Rick are able to find a home, but that also landlords are encouraged, as our first caller said, encouraged to actually put a unit onto the long-term rental market? And what can we do to improve those relationships, repair them?
It's kind of hard to say. It would help if our residential tenancy branch had a lot more funding. We would like to see a lot more run through there, like for landlord use evictions. Right now, you get the notice, and if you don't dispute it, no one ever knows about it. It's not counted as an eviction, even though they're happening every day. Another thing we would like to see is collective bargaining rights for tenants. That's something that the Prime Minister brought up, was that if we know what the rent was previously, then we could bargain, except that is absolutely not the case, especially in Vancouver. Yes, the previous rent might have been $1,400, but that doesn't help you to bring down the rent when it's now at $2,800, because there are 30 people behind you who will gladly pay that.
Let's take a couple more calls here now. And Edwina is calling us from Fort St. John. Hi, Edwina.
Hi there. How are you today?
I am fine. What do you make of a renter's bill of rights?
So I've kind of got 3 touch points. Number one, supply and demand. It doesn't matter what type of bill of rights you have. If there's no supply and the demand out proceeds the supply, you're going to have an issue. second point is affordable housing. Across Canada, 20, 30 years ago, 20% of our housing stock was social housing or affordable housing. And I haven't verified this number, but I have heard the number thrown around that today that figure is 3%. So, the last gentleman caller, when you're talking about affordable housing, right now affordable housing is defined as the median rental rate in the region. That doesn't meet below market housing needs, which is what folks are below the middle class, right? So we're not meeting those needs. And then for the Renters' Bill of Rights, you talk about enforcement. It's great to put all these Band-Aids and these bells and whistles out. That sounds wonderful, but what does the enforcement and actual enforcement of this look like? And at the end of the day, if there's no housing stock, what good does it do?
Edwina, thank you very much. Enforcement was something that Rebecca Love brought up earlier as well. Let's take our last caller here. And Dennis is on the line from North Vancouver. Hi, Dennis. What do you make of a Renters' Bill of Rights? Will it help?
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my call. It sounds great on paper, but like some of the previous callers, it's devil's in the details, and enforcement might be a problem. I'm just thinking that, in many European cities, many families have lived as renters for generations, their whole lives, and family, generation after generation, and it's normal, and they can't get rent-evicted. It's just not allowed. And so, I would like to see something closer to that. And I'm speaking as a homeowner. I'm older. I bought a house way back in the 1980s when the cost of housing had everything to do with incomes. That's no longer the case. And, I hear people saying, we have to build more. There's not enough housing. I think really we have to look at, do we want to have housing for people to live in, to be reserved for people to live in, or is it to make money from? And in our present situation, it's to make money from, and that explains the ridiculous price of houses and rents. And what about if me as a homeowner, I'm allowed to have one home in the city and one vacation property in the countryside, and, restrict how many properties a family can own, or a corporation, or a nefarious financial entity. I mean, it's one thing to build more houses, but if it's just going to be the same people, people with enormous wealth buying them up and, in the past turning them into Airbnbs.
Housing as an investment. And you mentioned Airbnbs just now. So yes, that short-term rental issue, of course, is an ongoing one here in BC. Dennis, thank you so much for the call. I do have to wrap up there. Rebecca Love, really appreciate hearing from you. I'm sure we'll talk again as we get more details about this. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
That's Rebecca Love, a volunteer with the Vancouver Tenants Union. 12:29, 1:29 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today. And do stay tuned to CBC. We have more for you throughout the day. And here's Gloria Makarenko with what's coming up in Metro Vancouver with On the Coast.
Michelle, hello there. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and coming up on the Coast this afternoon, lots of talk from the Prime Minister this week, introducing a national Renters' Bill of Rights to protect tenants from bad acting landlords. I know you've had discussions around that. So we're going to see how that announcement is landing with Landlord BC on the program this afternoon. And our Soapbox Social panel, Mo Amir and Kyla Lee, they'll be here too to respond what they've heard from the Prime Minister. Also, if you've ever driven along Highway 17 near the Portman Bridge, you'll have noticed a lot of big trucks parked along the shoulder of the road. Well, today marks the first day of a new North Surrey truck parking facility. Yeah, it's opened up, and our own Caroline Chan is going to take us there. I hope you can join us for On the Coast between 3 and 6.
Gloria, thank you very much. That is Gloria Makarenko with On the Coast, and you can hear that every weekday afternoon from 3 to 6 p.m. right here on CBC Radio 1. This is BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Very nice to be with you this afternoon. And you know who's going to be with us in our next half hour? Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen will be live on the line from Houston, Texas. He's preparing for a NASA mission heading to the moon. They will venture around the moon for the mission Artemis 2. He will be the first Canadian to do so. He will join us to take your calls and your questions. I know a lot of kids are on spring break, so you can have the chance to call in to a real-life astronaut and ask your questions about life as a space explorer. You can call us after this CBC News Update with Zara Premji.
Good afternoon. Here are your headlines from the CBC Vancouver newsroom. I'm Zara Premji, as Michelle said, and a rescue team says it might be forced to capture an orphan killer whale calf and carry it to the open ocean. The calf has been limited to a lagoon off North Vancouver Island since its mother died this past weekend. A DFO spokesperson says efforts by a team of experts and First Nations members have failed to get the 2-year-old to leave the remote lagoon through a narrow passage during high tide. They believe its only chance of survival is to link up with its pod in open water. And environmentalists are not happy the province has issued an environmental assessment certificate for a controversial marine jetty in Delta that will serve ships exporting liquefied natural gas. The Western Canada Wilderness Committee says the province's approval signals that the BC government has chosen the fossil fuel industry over taxpayers. In other news, a BC lawyer has been disbarred. Nick Weiser was already serving an 8th-month suspension. The Law Society of BC found he used his law firm's trust account for his personal financial benefit and had been practicing law while suspended. And now onto the BC forecast. On the north coast, a mix of sun and cloud with a high around 12. Moving over to the Peace, you're looking at around a high of 0. In the central interior, including Prince George, periods of snow today with a high of 3. In the Boundary and Kootenay regions, flurries, potential thunderstorms, but a bit of sun as well, and a high of 8. For the southern interior, including Kelowna, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 11. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, you're looking at highs around 11. And that is your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Not a bad Easter weekend, long weekend.
Yeah, I think the weather might hold. I'm not too sure.
Yeah,
they don't
I know.
pay me enough. I don't know. I can't make it sunny.
Wow, what a way to negotiate. If you pay me more, I'll tell you what Easter's looking like. I'll help you with that Easter egg hunt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Big Easter plans, I'm sure, for you.
Just pay me in chocolates.
Yes.
That's really all I need.
I'll take eggies. Eggies or mini eggs or cream eggs.
You like the cream eggs. I am not a fan of the cream egg.
I know, Gloria doesn't like them either. It's controversial, but I like them. I'll take yours.
Yeah, exactly. And you can pass on just the plain little ones. The mini eggs
you can have those. Those are boring. I'm done with them.
Gosh, they are so good. You know what I'm a fan of? They're not necessarily Easter themed, but chocolate-covered almonds.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're kind of egg-shaped, right?
Yeah. So, those last all year round.
If I find, they're not seasonal. They're all seasons.
If you're feeling Easter in November, Michelle's got your answer.
Exactly. Chocolate-covered almonds. I've got your back.
Yes.
Well, I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks so much, Zara.
You too, friend. Thanks.
Zara Premji in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. This is BC Today. And we just wrapped up a conversation about housing and renter protections being promised by the federal government. Well, Robert writes, I voted for Trudeau twice and will never again. He's completely out of touch with reality and only reacts to issues once they reach crisis level. And Sammy writes, governments need to school landlords on the rules of the Residential Tenancy Act, and big fines should be for those who refuse to follow government rules for tenancy. Thank you for your emails. You can send them bctoday@cbc.ca. Welcome back here with BC Today here on CBC. We're on Radio 1, live streaming as well on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page, also on CBC Television. Thanks so much for watching us. And we are taking your calls to astronaut Jeremy Hansen. You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. We are trying to connect right now with Jeremy from Houston, Texas. So as soon as we get that connection up, we will go to him. Right now, we have a lot of emails from our topic yesterday on the program. And yesterday, we talked to Erica Stavinga of Creston, who had just been through what she called a very traumatic experience, emergency brain surgery, after it was revealed and she learned that she had a genetic disease, quite a rare one, and it caused her severe headaches and loss of vision. Now, she was sent for emergency surgery at Kelowna General Hospital, and she's now recovering and really wanted to thank the surgeon, Dr. Michael So, and the staff at Kelowna General. And it was that heartfelt gratitude that was really part of an email that she sent to us at CBC. And so we spoke with her, and we heard her story yesterday. We also spoke with the surgeon, the neurosurgeon, who performed the procedure. And so after that, we also asked you if there was a healthcare worker you would like to thank. And we had a lot of calls, a lot of very touching calls, and a lot of touching emails as well. I have them with me now. And Vivian writes, I just want to thank the wonderful chiropractor in Victoria who helped my late husband during his cancer journey and with me with an SI issue. Seeing him once a month over the years has brought us close. I love him like family. Dan writes, I'd like to shout out the good work of many staff at several hospitals, including Lady Minto on Salt Spring, Royal Jubilee, and Victoria General, for whom I've become a familiar face over the last 2 years. It took 2 years after the pandemic was declared before I caught COVID, working an essential job in the grocery business here on Salt Spring Island. I developed long COVID with severe neurological complications. I have developed a seizure disorder, which defies the usual medications. From what little I actually remember on my numerous trips to Lady Minto Hospital and on to Victoria for a CT or MRI, I recall being treated with care and respect, and my condition was treated with all the attention it deserved. And I am forever grateful for that. Thank you to every staff member, too numerous to name. David writes us, for my first diagnosis some 8 years ago, I knew I had to reassure everyone that I would be fine, that my cancer was different from my brother's fatal diagnosis. 2 years after my treatment, I bought the first bike I've ever owned and joined a few thousand people on a ride between Vancouver and Seattle. Last Christmas, I told my family of my second diagnosis and how my fibula was going to be grafted to my jaw, replacing the tumor and bone of another cancer. Breakthroughs by people like my care team at BC Cancer and UBC have taken some of the horror out of a cancer diagnosis, almost normalizing an often highly treatable ailment. Tomorrow, 5 weeks after my surgery, I will get back on my bike, my second one, to start training for a century ride in September. There are brilliant people shining a light into the once dark hallway of a cancer diagnosis. Thank you to my care team and Vancouver General Hospital, UBC, BC Cancer, and especially my wife, Kirsten, and my son, James. Thank you so much, and I'm sure the people who worked with you and gave you that care and that empathetic care are very grateful for your emails. Thanks so much for sending them to us, bctoday@cbc.ca. It is 12:40 now, 1:40 in the Mountain Time Zone, and astronaut Jeremy Hansen is set to make history when he becomes the first Canadian to travel to the moon. He'll be taking flight on board the NASA Artemis II mission, departing after September 2025. Now, his passion for space exploration goes back to his childhood, growing up on a farm in Ontario. And it is a long road of preparation ahead for this adventure. And part of it involves talking to students and the public. And so this half hour, Jeremy Hansen joins us to take your questions. We'd love to hear from you. Do you have a question about how to prepare for a trip to the moon? And do you have a child, first of all, as well, who is fascinated with outer space and would like to become an astronaut? Love to hear from you. You can talk to a real-life astronaut, Jeremy Hansen. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, bctoday@cbc.ca. And it's my pleasure to welcome Jeremy Hansen from Houston, Texas. Hello, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much for joining us. Feet still firmly planted on the ground for now.
Yeah, still here for now, but working away with the team, and pretty excited about this opportunity to launch into deep space and see the moon up close and the Earth from the perspective of the moon. It's just thrilling for me to think about.
Oh my goodness. Where does this thrill go back to? When did it begin?
That's really neat because my recollection of this is I was inspired in early childhood. My mom will tell you I was 5 years old. I don't remember the age, but I saw an image of Neil Armstrong on the moon. Maybe it was Buzz Aldrin, but one of the two of them in that image. And I just went back to that book over and over and over again and started talking about exploring space. I never really gave up on that dream.
Wow. And when you saw these pictures, what do you think that sparked in you?
I think it sparked possibility. What I do remember is being just surprised the fact that humans left Earth and left boot prints on the moon. And when I would look at the moon in the night sky, I realized people had been there. And that was extraordinary to me. And I think it just opened up what was possible.
Yeah, open up. And as a kid, I mean, were you going around thinking things were spaceships?
I turned my treehouse into a spaceship. So I had this really neat treehouse that my dad made me, and then I got circuit breakers out of the barn that I found for switches, and I made a control column, and I had dials made out of cardboard with popsicle sticks for needles. Drew on the wall, and I was exploring space in my treehouse for years.
Yeah, and here you are now. Oh my goodness, what a story that you tell. Jeremy Hansen is with me, Canadian astronaut set to make history as the first Canadian to venture to the moon. We're going to hear more about that, the NASA Artemis II mission as well from Jeremy in a moment. But we would love to hear from you. What are your questions for Jeremy as to how he's preparing? Any space questions you have? And if you have a child who is fascinated by outer space as well and turns their own treehouse, their couches into makeshift spaceships. Love to hear from you. You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and pound 690 on your cell phone. Samantha is joining us from Cumberland. Hi, Samantha. Hi there, Samantha. Hi, Samantha. Can you hear me? I can hear someone. Kaya, is that you?
Yeah.
Hi, Kaya. You are 4 years old, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you have a question for Jeremy Hansen, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
How do we brush our teeth?
In space?
Oh, hi, Kaya. Sorry, I didn't hear the question. Can you ask that again?
How do we brush our teeth in outer space?
Oh,
Great
how do we brush
question.
our teeth in outer space? Yeah, well, very important. Just like we have to take care of our bodies here on Earth, when astronauts go to space, of course, we have to still take care of our bodies. And so we brush our teeth very similar. We have a regular toothbrush with regular toothpaste. But then for water, we don't have a cup to rinse out our mouth. We just have to have water in a bag. So we have like a drinking bag of water with a straw. And then we just squirt the water into our mouth. And if we want to spit out that water, we have to spit it out into a towel and let the towel absorb the water. So almost the same thing, we just don't have a sink.
Aha. Kaya, why did you want to ask that question?
How come?
Because I haven't been in outer space.
Aha. Do you love pictures of outer space?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Kaya, I'm so glad that you called. That is a really good question. Thank you for calling.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
That's Kaya and her mom, Samantha, joining us from Cumberland. Have you been practicing all of this, Jeremy?
Some of it, absolutely.
Yeah.
We do a lot of training, getting ready to go to space, of course. Our mission is somewhat unique in the fact that we're going to be the first crew to fly this capsule on this rocket. And so everything is new. No one has ever done it on this vehicle before. And we're still figuring a lot of stuff out, and we don't have it all done yet. And that's sort of the nature of a test and development program. You are going as quickly as you safely can, and some stuff won't be ready until the very end. If it was already done, we would go now, but we're not quite there. So we're still figuring stuff out, and it's a lot of fun. I love it.
And it's
an amazing team.
Pardon me, it's being delayed, right? And because of all of those other details.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, we were originally going to launch at the end of this year, and then we delayed it to September of 25. And there's a number of things that we're looking at that we still need to work on. One of them was the heat shield, which is what protects us when we come home at really high velocities. We're going to be doing about Mach 38, 39 when we come back from the moon. It's really fast. That's 38 times the speed of sound. And it's a lot of energy you have to dissipate. And so we really need this heat shield to work. Otherwise, we won't survive. So from our perspective, it's worth waiting for.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take another call. Keith is joining us from Prince George with a question for astronaut Jeremy Hansen. Hi, Keith. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Hello, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Keith. Nice to speak with you.
Yes, it's awesome. I was just wondering if you needed any dry fish to bring with you. I got some if you need.
Man, people from across the country are pitching in to make this happen. I really appreciate the offer. I have already picked some salmon bites for the mission, actually. So it has to go through the Canadian Space Agency and the NASA Food Lab, and that is one thing that is already done. So I will have some Canadian salmon on the mission, which would be awesome.
And Keith, that is such a great offer. Why did you want to pitch that?
The last astronaut there, he had a piece of fish when he went out to space there. I forget his name.
Is it Chris Hadfield or?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get a chance on your next trip, Jeremy.
Yes, absolutely.
Keith, thank you so much. Anything else you want to say to Jeremy?
Good luck and have a good time. Enjoy yourself.
Thanks, Keith. I appreciate that. And your sentiment and your generosity resonates. And what it brings to mind for me is it's just been such a warm response to this mission. But it's so important that we recognize why a Canadian is going on a mission like this, is going to leave Earth and fly around the moon, and why Canada will be the second country in the world to send a human into deep space. And it's because of that teamwork. It's because of that approach we have in Canada, where we have people bringing their genius, creating innovation that we are sharing on the international stage that brings real value, such that we've been invited to be the second country in the world to do this. And I think that is an enormous compliment for Canada, and just a great reminder for us as Canadians that we can do extraordinary things if we just set goals and we work together to achieve them. So thanks for being one of those people, Keith.
And tell us more about Artemis 2. What is the goal? What does it entail?
So really big picture, the Artemis program, because Artemis 2 is just one step in this program. We're trying to get humans to Mars and back safely. And we've determined that the next step for that, to figure out how to truly do that, is to go back to the moon, to explore some regions of the moon that we haven't been to before, specifically the South Pole. We think there's frozen water, ice there on the South Pole. That's one item of specific interest. But we also want to create the infrastructure, the reusability. We want to reduce the cost of exploring space throughout these missions to the moon. And so that is Artemis. Artemis is going to take us to the surface of the moon eventually. On Artemis 2, we won't land. We'll just prove out the capsule, this Orion capsule, first time we use it. We're also building a lunar lander that'll be ready later, that the future crews will use to go to the surface. But for our mission, it'll be about 9 days long. And we'll spend about a day in Earth orbit, testing the capsule, make sure it is ready for deep space. It's never supported humans in deep space before, so we have a bunch of stuff we have to test before we go. And then once we're sure it's ready, we're going to leave for the moon, and that'll take another 8 days to fly out around the moon and come back.
Let's take another call here, and I'll give out the phone numbers once again. Your questions, your calls to Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. Matthew is up next from the News Bay. Hello, Matthew. Welcome. Hi there, Matthew. Matthew, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Can you not hear me?
Yes, we sure can. We can now. Thanks so much. What is your question?
Oh, I was going to say, you kind of just asked my question. I was curious why, like, what we get out of these trips to the moon, et cetera. Like, what is the purpose of going back and forth? It just seems like an awfully big endeavor for little to, it seems like from little to no return, considering how much expertise and knowledge we need to help figure out the issues on the planet we live on.
It's still a good question, Matthew. Pardon me, go ahead.
I was just curious what his thoughts were. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's still a really good question. Thank you very much. Yes, what does it help us solve? There are so many crises here, right? Climate change on Earth. So what does going to the moon help us solve here?
Yeah, I agree. It's an important question we have to always be asking ourselves. And, what is most important? And I think from our perspective in Canada, certainly a perspective I share, what's most important is that we learn to collaborate on planet Earth and solve the problems here. I think in Canada, our values, they ring pretty loud and clear. We believe everybody has equal value on this planet. We stick up for others around the world when they can't stick up for themselves. We look for fairness and justice around the world, and that's important. So how does the space program contribute to that? And in my personal experience with the space program is it's actually a pretty significant contribution. And it's not one of the things that you can always draw a direct line, but what I see is that what we're actually trying to do, which is solve big problems as an international or a global community, is being done in the space program. We're setting big goals to do hard things. And these goals are so big that we bring people together from around the world to do it. So I'll just give you an example. The International Space Station, it's been in space with people on it for coming up on 24 years by the end of this year. This is something, probably one of the hardest things humanity has ever done. But we didn't just do it as one country, we did it as an international collaboration, even with countries that were struggling to work with diplomatically on the planet. We've done and continue to do extraordinary things together in space. And this is a very important example for us, and to remind humanity we can do these big things. Okay. And what I see happen when you set these big goals, these people from around the world, they come together with their gifts, and they're attracted by things like space exploration, and they solve big problems. So let's just take a couple examples that we know affect Canadians today. Healthcare. Food security, especially with climate change and climate pressure, food security is a big deal. So as you go out into deeper space, these problems that we have on the planet now become your major problems in space exploration. How are we going to take care of space explorers in the vast remoteness of space? Or how are we going to provide food? So we can use the inspiration of the space exploration to bring people together on the planet to solve them here in Canada and then take these solutions to space.
Okay.
Could you do it without space? You could, but for some reason, this is part of being human, that we are driven to explore, and we leverage that to create solutions we need today.
Jeremy, I appreciate your tackling that question head on. Thank you very much. I have a couple of teens on the line with some questions for you. Evan is 15 from Coquitlam. Hi, Evan. What's your question for Jeremy Hansen?
Which part of the moon is he going to?
So for us, I will not land on the moon. Our crew will fly around the moon, and we'll fly around the far side of the moon and come back. In the future, though, we are specifically interested in landing on the south pole of the moon. So all the Apollo missions landed on the equatorial region of the moon, and now we want to send people to the south pole. We are specifically.
Evan, thank you so much. You're fascinated by the mission, are you?
Yes, thanks for having me on the line.
Oh, thank you very much for calling in. Enjoy the rest of your spring break, okay? And Lauren is up next now in West Vancouver, and Lauren is 13. Hi there.
Hello. My question is, how big is the capsule you'll be going in?
So the Orion capsule is roughly the size of a minivan. That's the space that we'll have. The capsule itself is obviously larger, but we'll be inside this small compartment, and it's sort of like being in a minivan. So imagine going car camping with 3 of your friends for 9 days in a minivan, but never getting out. And that's going to kind of be our experience. So it's going to be tight quarters, but we're a really close crew already. These are 3 people that I respect immensely, and we're going on this big adventure together. We're going to see some extraordinary things.
Wow. Lauren, why did you want to ask that question?
I wanted to ask that because I've heard the capsules are small, and how they're going to send people to Mars, because the capsules, they want to get bigger, right?
It's a really
that's right.
Really good question. Yeah.
Also, I have a question on how do you protect yourself against radiation in space?
So for our mission, we don't really have any special protection against radiation. The way we manage radiation is just by trying to understand it and to limit the space exposure we have. And so we're confident in a 9-day mission, our exposure will be very reasonable. We are going to do a little test while we're in our capsule. We're going to create a radiation protection environment inside by just rearranging some of the supplies and equipment we have to bring with us anyway. And we're going to create a little space that we can get in if we needed to, if there was like a solar flare or a high radiation event. We're going to prove that for future crews in case they need to use it.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I mean, it's really thinking of any eventuality. I wish you all the best in your preparations and, of course, all the safety and in your travels. And, of course, it's a long road still, so we'll touch base with you, I'm sure. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Jeremy Hansen, Canadian astronaut. He joined us from Houston, Texas.